Mia's return to Oak Ridge wasn't how she'd imagined it. After 8 years building her career as a physician assistant in Boston, she'd created a life she was proud of, one that felt worlds away from the small town she'd grown up in. But when her sister Ellie called about Grandpa Joe's declining health, Mia didn't hesitate. Within days, she'd arranged a 3-month leave of absence and packed her car for the long drive home. "He's been asking for you," Ellie had said, her voice cracking. "Mom and Uncle David keep telling him you're too busy to visit." Grandpa Joe's Victorian house looked smaller than Mia remembered, its once immaculate garden now overgrown. Inside, the familiar scent of pipe tobacco lingered, though Grandpa hadn't smoked in years. When she found him in his study, thinner and frailer than she'd prepared herself for, his face lit up. "There's my Mia bird," he said, using the childhood nickname that had always made her feel special. "They said you couldn't come." "I'm here now," she replied, squeezing his hand. "And I'm staying for a while." Her mother Caroline appeared in the doorway, surprise quickly masked by a tight smile. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I drove straight through," Mia explained. "I wanted to see Grandpa as soon as possible." "Well, you're just in time for dinner. David's coming over to discuss some paperwork. Nothing important. Just boring estate stuff." That evening set the pattern for the weeks that followed. Whenever Mia entered a room where her mother and uncle were talking, their conversation would abruptly shift. Documents would disappear into folders. Phones would be set face down. At first, Mia attributed their behavior to her mother's lifelong tendency to micromanage and her uncle's awkwardness around her medical knowledge. But as days passed, she noticed how they steered Grandpa Joe away whenever she spent too much time with him. How they scheduled his doctor appointments when she was out grocery shopping. How they whispered behind closed doors late into the night. 3 weeks after her arrival, Mia was organizing Grandpa's medications when she overheard them in the kitchen. "She's getting too involved," David said, his voice low but clear. "Joe's starting to ask questions." "What did you expect?" Caroline replied. "She's always been nosy. But we need to make sure she doesn't get her hands on anything before we're finished." "She won't. Besides, who would believe her? Everyone knows she abandoned the family for her fancy career. We're the ones who stayed." Mia froze, pill organizer in hand, as the truth crystallized. They weren't protecting Grandpa Joe, they were protecting themselves. And somehow, she had become the enemy. Mia began paying closer attention. She noticed how her mother intercepted Grandpa's mail, how Uncle David always insisted on driving him to appointments, how they both discouraged visits from his old friends. When she suggested bringing in home health care to supplement what she could provide, they immediately shut her down. "We can't afford strangers in the house," Caroline insisted, though Grandpa had always been comfortable financially. "Your grandfather doesn't want that," David added. "He values his privacy." But when Mia asked Grandpa directly, his answer surprised her. "I've been asking for help for months, Mia Bird. They keep saying it's unnecessary." One rainy afternoon, while her mother and uncle were at a church committee meeting, Mia helped Grandpa look for his reading glasses in his study. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath stacks of correspondence, she found a folder labeled Property Transfers. Inside were documents showing that over the past year, as Grandpa's health declined, his assets had been systematically moved into her mother's and uncle's names. His lake house, where Mia and Ellie had spent childhood summers, had been transferred to David. His investment accounts had been emptied into new ones under Caroline's name. Even the Victorian house they were living in now had a new deed, with both their names listed as owners. Most disturbing was a letter from Grandpa's longtime attorney, dated 6 months earlier, expressing serious concerns about these transfers, and requesting a meeting that had apparently never happened. "Grandpa," Mia asked carefully, "did you mean to give the lake house to Uncle David?" Confusion clouded his eyes. "Give it away? No, that's for you girls. Always has been." That evening, Mia called the attorney, Walter Simmons, who agreed to meet her for coffee the next day. The elderly lawyer confirmed her worst fears. "I've known your grandfather for 40 years, he said gravely. "These transfers don't reflect his wishes as expressed to me over decades. But when I raised concerns, your mother informed me that Joe had retained new counsel. I was effectively dismissed." "Possibly. But it would require proving he lacked capacity when these documents were signed, or that undue influence was exerted. Neither is easy." When Mia returned home, she found a woman she didn't recognize checking Grandpa's vital signs. She introduced herself as Nurse Fiona, explaining she'd been caring for Grandpa 3 days a week for the past month. I thought my mother said they couldn't afford home health care, Mia said, confused. Fiona looked uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to discuss arrangements with family members. Your mother was very clear about that. But later, as Fiona was leaving, she pulled Mia aside. I shouldn't tell you this, but something doesn't feel right here. Your grandfather often asks for you when you're out. Your mother tells him you're too busy with work calls to spend time with him. And last week, I overheard them telling him you were planning to put him in a nursing home. I know, Fiona said quietly, and it's not the first time I've seen this pattern. Elderly parents, isolated from some family members, assets mysteriously transferred. Just be careful, they know you're watching now. That night, Mia confronted her mother and uncle over dinner. I found the property transfer documents, she said calmly. And I spoke with Walter Simmons. The silence that followed was deafening until Caroline laughed, a brittle sound. Oh, Mia, always so dramatic. David slammed his hand on the table. How dare you? We've been taking care of him while you were off building your perfect life. You've always been jealous, Caroline said, her voice eerily calm. Always thought you deserved more than everyone else. Now you come back after years away and think you understand everything? You understand nothing, David snarled. You're just worried about your inheritance. Always were money hungry, even as a kid. The accusation was so absurd, so completely opposite to reality, that Mia could only stare at them. In that moment, she realized they weren't just lying to Grandpa and others. They had constructed an entire alternative reality in which their actions were justified. Over the next 2 weeks, the household atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Mia documented everything, photographing documents, recording conversations when legally permitted, keeping a detailed journal. She discovered her mother had been opening her mail and monitoring her phone calls. Uncle David had told Grandpa's friends that visitors tired him out too much. Most alarmingly, she learned from Ellie that their mother had been spreading stories about Mia's mental health issues and financial problems to extended family, painting her return as motivated by desperation rather than concern. To discredit me if I raise concerns, Mia explained. Classic abuser tactic: isolate the victim, discredit potential witnesses. Then came the day Mia found the new will. She hadn't been snooping. She'd simply been looking for insurance documents to sort out a billing issue with Grandpa's medications. But there it was, dated just 3 weeks before her arrival, signed with a shaky version of Grandpa Joe's signature. The document revoked all previous wills and left everything to Caroline and David, with a small token amount to Ellie. Mia was mentioned only in a clause stating she had been provided for during life through educational support, and therefore required no inheritance. There was no mention of the lake house that had always been promised to the grandchildren, nor of the college funds Grandpa had established for Ellie's kids. That evening, the family gathered for dinner with Reverend Phillips, their longtime pastor who had been invited by Caroline, ostensibly to provide spiritual comfort to Grandpa. As they ate, David raised his glass in a toast. To family loyalty, he said, his eyes sliding past Mia as if she weren't there. And to those who honor their obligations to care for their elders. The implication was clear, and Mia felt something snap inside her, not in anger, but in clarity. Speaking of family obligations, she said evenly, I'd like to understand the new will I found today. Grandpa, did you intend to leave everything to Mom and Uncle David? The silence was immediate and heavy. Grandpa looked confused. Will? What will? Caroline's fork clattered against her plate. This is hardly dinner conversation, Mia. I think it's exactly the right conversation. Especially with Reverend Phillips here as a witness. No, what takes nerve is manipulating an elderly man into signing away everything he's worked for. What takes nerve is lying to him about his own granddaughter. What takes nerve is pretending to care for someone while systematically stripping away his autonomy and assets. What have you done, Mom, besides isolate him, lie to him, and steal from him? Grandpa Joe looked between them, distress evident. What's happening? Caroline, what is Mia talking about? Caroline's expression instantly transformed, her voice softening. Nothing, Dad. Mia's just having some problems at work. She's been very stressed lately. The smooth lie, delivered with such practiced ease, confirmed everything. Mia looked at Reverend Phillips, whose uncomfortable expression suggested he sensed something was deeply wrong. Reverend, Mia said quietly, would you mind staying a moment after dinner? I think Grandpa could use some spiritual counsel privately. Later, after sharing the documentation with the Reverend, and watching his face grow increasingly grave, Mia knew she had reached the point of no return. This wasn't just about inheritance, it was about justice, dignity, and protection. Mia knew confrontation alone wouldn't work. Her mother and uncle had spent years constructing their narrative and positioning themselves as the devoted caregivers. She needed a strategic approach. Her first call was to Dr. Eleanor Winters, a geriatrics specialist she'd worked with in Boston, who recommended a colleague in Oak Ridge for an independent evaluation. Next, she contacted Sarah Levinson, an elder law attorney known for her aggressive advocacy. "What you're describing is unfortunately common," Sarah told her during their consultation. "The good news is that courts take elder abuse seriously. The bad news is these cases get messy, especially with family." "I'm not concerned about messy," Mia replied. "I'm concerned about protecting my grandfather and sister." Over the next 3 weeks, Mia built her case methodically. Dr. Winter's colleague assessed Grandpa Joe and documented significant cognitive impairment that would have affected his capacity to understand complex financial transactions during the period when most assets were transferred. Mia reconnected with Grandpa's old friends, many of whom had been told she was too busy to visit when they called. Harold Fisher, his chess partner of 30 years, was particularly helpful. "Joe always said the lake house was for you girls," Harold confirmed. "He had it all planned out. You'd get the house. Ellie would get the investment portfolio. He wanted things divided fairly." Meanwhile, Nurse Fiona provided documentation of concerning interactions she'd witnessed, including times when Grandpa was given medication before signing documents. Walter Simmons contributed a detailed timeline of his concerns and his eventual dismissal as counsel. The most difficult part was involving Ellie, who was terrified of causing trouble and potentially losing what little support their mother provided for her children. "This isn't about Mom's forgiveness," Mia explained gently. "It's about Grandpa's wishes and protecting what he wanted for your kids. Remember the college funds he set up? Those are gone now." That revelation finally convinced Ellie, who provided a sworn statement about conversations where their mother had explicitly discussed how to manage Grandpa's assets before Mia's return. With evidence in hand, Sarah filed for an emergency conservatorship, requesting an independent third party be appointed to manage Grandpa Joe's affairs and a freeze on all recently transferred assets pending investigation. "How could you do this to your own family?" Caroline screamed, waving the legal documents. "After everything we've done for you." "This isn't about me," Mia replied calmly. "It's about protecting Grandpa." "From what? From people who actually care about him?" "You'll regret this, Mia. Everyone will know what you've done." The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the interim, the court appointed a temporary guardian and ordered a comprehensive financial audit. Mia moved into a small apartment nearby to give everyone space while remaining close to Grandpa. As news spread through the family and small town, reactions were mixed and intense. Caroline and David worked overtime to control the narrative, portraying themselves as victims of Mia's big city ideas and greed. She couldn't stand that Dad wanted to recognize those who actually cared for him, Caroline told anyone who would listen. She abandoned this family years ago, and now she's trying to tear it apart. Some relatives and longtime family friends accepted this version of events without question. Aunt Patricia, Caroline's sister, was particularly vocal in her condemnation, sending Mia a scathing email about quote, betraying blood. But others had witnessed enough over the years to harbor doubts. Cousin Michael, who had his own troubled history with David, reached out to offer support. "They did something similar with Grandma Rose's jewelry before she died," he revealed. "I'm not surprised, just sad it's happening again." Harold Fisher and 3 other friends from Grandpa's weekly card game came forward with statements about how Caroline and David had gradually isolated him, canceling his social engagements and screening his calls. The most unexpected support came from Reverend Phillips, who requested a meeting with Mia after much prayer and reflection. "I've known your family for 30 years, he said gravely. "I've watched your mother and uncle become increasingly controlling of your grandfather's affairs. I regret not speaking up sooner." His testimony about the dinner confrontation and subsequent conversations with Grandpa Joe proved invaluable, lending moral authority to Mia's case. As the investigation progressed, the financial audit revealed even more extensive misappropriation than Mia had initially discovered. Beyond the property transfers, there were unexplained cash withdrawals, suspicious credit card charges, and loans taken against Grandpa's assets, with the proceeds unaccounted for. The most damning evidence came from Grandpa Joe himself. During a court-ordered evaluation, in a moment of remarkable clarity, he stated his wishes unequivocally. "The lake house is for my granddaughters," he insisted to the evaluator. "Always has been, and Ellie's children need their education secured. I promised my late wife I'd see to that." When shown the new will, he became agitated. "I never wanted to cut out Mia. Never. She's my Mia bird." 2 days before the final hearing, Caroline made a desperate attempt at reconciliation, arriving at Mia's apartment, unannounced. "We can still fix this," she said, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "Drop the case, and we'll make sure you and Ellie are taken care of." Mia studied her mother's face, searching for genuine remorse, but finding only calculation. "This was never about my inheritance, Mom. It was about honoring Grandpa's wishes and protecting him from exploitation." "You always were self-righteous," Caroline snapped, mask slipping. "Fine. But remember, when this is over we're still family. You'll have to live with what you've done." The court ruled in favor of establishing a permanent conservatorship, appointing a professional fiduciary to manage Grandpa Joe's affairs. The judge ordered a full accounting of all assets transferred within the past 5 years and froze several accounts pending further investigation. Caroline and David faced not only civil but potential criminal charges for financial elder abuse. They eventually agreed to a settlement that required returning most assets to Grandpa's estate and paying substantial penalties. For Mia, the victory was bittersweet. The family was irrevocably fractured, with some relatives taking sides and others withdrawing from the conflict entirely. But amid the wreckage, new connections formed. Ellie, emboldened by standing up for what was right, began therapy to address the patterns of manipulation she'd normalized throughout her life. Grandpa Joe, though still declining physically, seemed more at peace with Mia and Ellie regularly at his side. In his final months, free from the web of lies and manipulation, Grandpa shared stories and wisdom Mia had never heard before. He spoke of his late wife, of dreams fulfilled and regrets carried, of the values he hoped would outlive him. "You remind me of her," he told Mia one evening, as they watched the sunset from his porch. "Same backbone, same heart." When he passed peacefully 6 months later, his affairs were in order. The lake house went to Mia and Ellie, as he'd always intended. The investment portfolio, partially recovered, secured educational trusts for Ellie's children. Caroline and David received token bequests, enough to satisfy legal requirements but clear statements of the consequences of their actions. At the memorial service, Mia stood beside Ellie, both of them stronger for having weathered the storm together. Instead of using her portion of the inheritance for herself, Mia established the Joseph Martin Scholarship Fund for students pursuing careers in elder care advocacy. "Grandpa believed in turning hardship into purpose," she explained to those gathered. "This fund will help ensure other families have advocates when they need them most." In the years that followed, Mia maintained careful boundaries with her mother and uncle, while remaining open to genuine change should it ever come. She built a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued integrity over blood ties. Most importantly, she carried forward her grandfather's true legacy, not of money or property, but of courage, principle, and the unwavering belief that it's never too late to stand for what's right.